As the conversation continues across the greater Yellowstone ecosystem about whether or not to delist the grizzly bear, we thought we would take a step back to understand why those grizzly bears were put on the endangered list to begin with. For that, we have to go back a few years.
So Yellowstone National Park was established in 1872, primarily to protect the natural and geologic features. Congress was specifically looking to maintain and protect the natural wonders of Yellowstone. Animals were secondary.
And actually, some of the first visitors to Yellowstone were there to decrease the population of animals. They were hunters that targeted bears and wolves specifically. By the turn of the century, there were nearly no wolves left in Yellowstone.
Certain hunting groups actually go so far as to want to improve and increase the number of animals in Yellowstone. And so they introduce the mountain goat. The mountain goat that we see today in Yellowstone is not indigenous to the park. They were introduced as a hunting species, as an animal to be culled by hunters.
So by the turn of the century, there are nearly zero animals to hunt here in Yellowstone. Superintendent Horace Albright decided, well, listen, if we're going to keep people coming here, if we're going to keep that money coming here, we need to give visitors a unique experience that they cannot get anywhere else.
And the best way to do that is to give them an up-close and personal interaction with Yellowstone wildlife. So Albright is the person to decide, let's encourage people to feed the animals. Visitors expected those interactions. Visitors started judging the quality of their visit by how many animals they could feed and how dangerous were the animals that they could feed and how close could they get to the animals that they were feeding.
Of course, one of the main issues with this is that these animals now are putting aside their natural migration patterns. They are staying where humans are because that's where the food is. Well, in the winter months when the humans leave because of the snow, these animals are now starving.
Many hotels and restaurants and even the Park Service managed garbage dumps throughout the park. These dumps were just landfills. Bears, specifically grizzly bears, very quickly learned the dump times. And so at 5 o'clock, when the hotels would bring their trash and dump them in the landfill, bears would show up. These garbage dumps actually become major tourist attractions because where else are you going to see a dozen grizzly bears at one time? And so a lot of hotels and businesses would actually put up bleachers right next to the landfill. And so at 5 o'clock, the bleachers would fill up with tourists, the tractor would take the trash out and dump it, and then in comes all of these grizzly bears.
Of course, now looking at some of these pictures, we just think, oh my gosh, how did we ever think this was a good idea? I want to point out here, this is not ignorance for malice. We know what we know, right? We can leave it up to a group of people to hypothesize the pros and cons of feeding animals, but we needed actual scientific data to show why this was not a good idea.
Finally, in 1968, the federal government releases what they call the Leopold Report. And it recognizes that the continued interaction and practice of feeding wildlife is a long-term detriment to sustained wildlife populations.
The decision was made to completely eliminate all landfill and trash dump sites within the park boundaries. Ironically, those who opposed this mandate were actually the biologists who were fighting on behalf of the bears' well-being.
Their argument is that for generations upon generations of bear in the park, they had learned to solely depend on humans for food. They had completely forgotten those natural foraging behaviors. They no longer knew where to go hunting. They no longer knew how to fish. They no longer knew where they could go to prepare for hibernation. If you eliminate all of these known food sources as quickly as you're planning to, you're going to throw the bear population into starvation. And their prophecy becomes true. Within just a few years, the population of grizzly bears in Yellowstone National Park drops below 150 bears. More and more bears are straying into populated areas. They're becoming more and more violent as they become more and more desperate for food. And because of that, more and more grizzly bears are being euthanized. It's at this point that the American grizzly bear is put on the endangered species list.